On the night of October 5th, 1995, following 42 months of brutal war in southeastern Europe, a 60-day ceasefire agreement was signed by the warring factions as the sun began to set. It was a promise to stop the bullets, bombs, and killings for 2 months, starting at midnight on October 10th, giving leaders from all sides the opportunity to negotiate peace and bring an end to the brutal violence. At the time, this war in Bosnia was the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II, resulting in the death of over 100,000 people and displacing over 2.2 million, a complete bloodbath, the result of 3 ethnic groups refusing to live in a country where a majority would rule over them. To introduce peace, the foundation of the new government would need to be equal, with unique power-sharing laws that ensured all 3 groups proper authority, and to accomplish this, Camp David-style peace talks would be needed. What happened next would come to be known as the Dayton Agreement. On November 1st, following the ceasefire, leaders Alija Izetbegović, Franjo Tudjman, and Slobodan Milošević flew to Dayton, Ohio with over 800 staff to negotiate the end of the war in Bosnia. Led by U.S. Secretary of State Warren Christopher and negotiator Richard Holbrooke, 21 days later, the agreement was initialed, officially signed in Paris, France on the 14th of December, 1995. It was a monumental moment for Western diplomacy and European stability. Dayton had brought the 3 warring sides into an accord that ensured each would be given the status of constituent people, allowing for equal power sharing and a unique government structure to facilitate the unusual circumstances within its borders. But as we are about to see in the rest of this video, one small change to Dayton in the early 2000s set the country on a course destined for trouble, and without intervention, the coming elections in October may endanger the fragile region once again. With 3 rotating presidents, 2 distinct autonomous regions, and a higher representative who serves as the unelected viceroy overseeing the entire country, Bosnia and Herzegovina is home to one of the most complex forms of government in the world, a structure delicately negotiated to ensure Croats, Bosniaks, and Serbs each get proper authority within the country. Now, the reason why this is emphasized will become clear later in the video. The origin story of this nation is without question extremely unusual, created when 3 warring sides were brought to a table on an American military base. The solution had to be one where all 3 ethnic groups were guaranteed equal representation in government with various power-sharing laws and the right to prevent the imposition of specific laws that harmed their vital national interests. To achieve this, each group was given the status of a constituent nation, and an outside civilian position called a higher representative was given broad power to ensure that Dayton stays implemented. Now, for Americans, Canadians, Brits, and others throughout Europe, this is likely the part of the video where you lose interest and click off. Why does this tiny state with a population of around 3 million people even matter? Its GDP is 2 times smaller than that of South Dakota. It's a dot on the map, economically irrelevant and forgotten by the world as a once war-torn Balkan outpost. But statistics and stereotypes don't capture the true importance of this country. It's here where a massive web of political interests meet, entangled in a mess that is currently held together by a coalition of international forces and a document signed in 1995. This region can only be described as the world's geopolitical rendezvous point. To one side are NATO, the EU, and a massive alliance that is known simply as the West. To the east, a different coalition with connections that find themselves increasingly distant from the rest of the world. And to the south, a religious alliance that supports what was once the furthest outpost of the Ottoman Empire. Each constituent people, Croats, Serbs, and Bosniaks, look in different directions for support. And now in 2022, just as elections approach in October, a massive slow-moving train wreck is appearing on the horizon, one that endangers the very document that holds the country together. Croats, the nation's smallest minority, have found themselves pinned against the wall. What began as a promise of equality quickly changed following a decision made in 2002. Back then, the OHR, which I mentioned earlier, well, they made a decision that in retrospect became the source for the crises today. The OHR issued a rule that required half the country, known as the Federation, to elect 1 Serb, 1 Croat, and 1 Bosniak delegate to the Federation House of People. Think of it as their version of Congress. But the ruling had a major flaw. It meant that this canton within the Federation would elect 1 Croat to the House, despite the fact that the entire municipality had only 23 Croats living there. To showcase the absurdity of this ruling, it meant that Canton 5 had the same number of Croat representatives as Canton 8, which has 93,000 Croats. Now, this may sound like an advantage for the Croats on paper, but look a bit deeper and you see what is clearly the end of Dayton as we know it. With this ruling, Bosniaks completed a political power grab using a unique loophole that was made possible by this 2002 rule change. Remember how I said the country has 3 rotating presidents, 1 Croat, 1 Bosniak, and 1 Serb? Well, that comes with incredibly complex election rules. In the Federation, for example, every citizen can decide whether to vote for a Bosniak or a Croat representative. However, since Bosniaks make up 70% of the Federation's population and Croats only 22%, a candidate running to represent Croats in the presidency can be effectively elected even without a majority among the Croat community. This happens if enough Bosniak voters decide to vote on a Croat ballot. This has also happened multiple times throughout the past decade, most notably with this man who won the Croat seat for president despite the fact that he was supported by less than 2.5% of the voters in the predominantly Croat 8th canton. This issue is compounded in elections outside the presidency, where Bosniaks can elect enough Croats in enough cantons so that Bosniak delegates and Croat delegates elected by Bosniaks can eliminate the majority of the Croat population from power and start the slow process of making amendments to the constitution of both the Federation and Dayton. Now, this loophole is a big deal in the coming elections because it's pretty clear that once again it will be exploited by the majority side. If this Bosniak plot for the 2022 elections were to succeed, it would almost certainly unravel the guarantees of both the Dayton Agreement and the Washington Agreement. Political chaos would be a certainty. Not only would Croats be furious at the termination of their status as a constituent nation, but the Serb party members would use this opportunity to make a case to the world that Bosniaks are attempting to reduce Serbs to an ethnic minority, and that only a strong and potentially independent Republic Srpska is what's necessary to escape this political provocation. But there is good news. All of this can be avoided through one simple action: a rule change by the OHR. Close the loophole by introducing a 3% rule, which would mean that a municipality like this, which does not have at least 3% of the population as Croats, cannot elect a Croat representative. With this action, the guarantees of Dayton and Washington cannot be undone by the 2022 October election, a necessary action to preserve Dayton. But time is running out, and with the OHR under pressure, the region finds itself once again heating up as ethnic groups who were promised representation are seeing power evaporate through loopholes meant to exploit the foundation of Dayton, an agreement paid for by blood. As the clock clicks and the election approaches, the world watches as the stable floor in one of the world's most contentious regions gives way to political injustice and chaos. The OHR must make the right decision soon, and without it, the entire region risks the end of Dayton. Thank you guys for watching. As always, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed it. Also, if you're on Twitter, make sure you give Luka Misetic a follow. He's one of the leading experts on this issue and was a massive resource in helping create this video. The link is in the description below.